You're tuning into the Careering with Cameron podcast, your safe place for asking all the dumb questions about finding a job. Thanks for joining us with Careering with Cameron. In our previous episodes, we talked through the various elements of job search: resume writing, LinkedIn profiles, being able to network, understanding your elevator, understanding how to find opportunities, and finally interviewing. The next phase, many times, is the most anxious part of the search. So we've gotten to the point where we have this opportunity in front of us. We go on an interview, maybe we go on multiple interviews, but there's a couple steps along the way that I don't want you to miss out on as you're preparing for your next chapter. First of all, we talked about being in that interview and being someone who's memorable, having things that you connect to the interviewer with that you can come back to and share your perspective on, whether it's about the position or the company or your previous experience. We also want you to have some connection component where you're able to go back and share something that happened maybe during that interview or something that happened with respect to the conversations or conversation along the way. So we are at the thank you note point, right? You have wrapped up the interview. Hopefully it's gone really well. Clock is now ticking. You have about 24 hours if you are sending an electronic thank you note. If you're sending a thank you note in the snail mail, that's a different story. You've got obviously more time. There are lots of questions that I field around like electronic thank you note versus one in the mail, which one is preferred. I would think that in the earlier stages of interviewing, you want to be able to send an electronic thank you note because you don't want, for some reason, the thank you note to get caught up in mail and not arrive on time. And depending on what their process looks like and how fast they're moving, you may not have enough time to be able to send one in the regular mail. Regular mail thank you notes, though, are very classy and something I would recommend you do maybe as a final interview when you know you have the position locked up. It's just kind of a follow-up thank you. The bottom line here is this. In the thank you note, you want to do a couple things, right? First, you want to express interest in the position. You want to be able to thank them for their time. If you are in a position where you have interviewed with one person, that's relatively easy to navigate because you are sending that note to one person. Ideally, you have gotten either their email from a business card, or maybe it's on the calendar invite, or maybe it's something that you have from the recruiter who shared it with you. But ideally, we want to be able to have that email so we can send the thank you note. We want to make sure, like I said, we're thanking them for their time. We're telling them again how excited we are about the opportunity, and we're talking to them about what we found most exciting about the role. Those are kind of the first couple things we want to make sure you hit. Then you want to be able to share something that makes you a connection to them. That can be, I'm glad we were able to talk about sports at whatever team or whatever college to show that there's some commonality with the interviewer and yourself, so that they go, oh yeah, I remember exactly who this is, and I know that I really enjoyed the conversation with them about football. So those are things we want to be able to include because it continues to make you a real person to them. It continues to make you someone that they know, someone they're comfortable with. We're building that connection with them. The next piece is we want to be able to share with them, still excited about the role, but also curious about the timeline. And if we haven't closed them in the interview, and hopefully we have, to say, what does the timeline look like for you for this interview process, then at this point, we want to essentially put something down in the thank you note to say, I look forward to hearing about next steps. If I don't hear anything by, let's say if it's Monday, you don't hear anything by Wednesday, you'll reach out to see if you can help to schedule by sharing your availability, right? We want to make sure that you have continued to make it as easy as possible, as we talked about early on with finding interviews, make it as easy as possible for them to schedule time with you and to not have to search or look for things or figure out when or go back and forth about what time you're available or what day. That makes it super easy, right? It also says to them, I want to see if they are going to come back and follow up on the timeline that they established. What does their attention to detail look like? Are they somebody that I can rely on because their attention to detail is very strong? This is like a free bonus example of how awesome you are. So make sure that you are using that piece. That's the first piece of the thank you note, right? If you get into a situation where you have an interview with a panel, yes, you can send them a collective thank you note. You don't need to send one for each person. It's a panel interview, so it would be very challenging for you to personalize a thank you note to each person. Just send one to the group. You may be in a position where you need to send one to the recruiter and have them share it with the group, but ideally, that group session, the panel interview, you can send one thank you note. If you are in a day-long marathon of interviews that meets with multiple people on the way, clearly that is still a thank you note for each person. If it's something where you maybe don't have email addresses, I recommend reaching out to the recruiter or the person who set it up and seeing if you can get those email addresses. They may very well say, just send me the thank you note and I will share it with them. That's fine. We want to be able to get to that information earlier when you're with the person so that you make sure that you're able to contact them, right? You want to make sure that your information gets to them, your thank you note and follow-up gets to them in a timely fashion the way you intended. So those are pieces that are really important. Other questions would be, what if I am in a situation where I have a panel interview and I also have interviews with people who are outside that panel that maybe are part of a team, and it's sort of like a whole big day with different levels of the organization. I would break that up. So if you're with a panel, you can send one. Maybe people who would be on the prospective team you could be joining. Maybe you send one to just them if there's a small group. Maybe if you go to lunch with them or something like that. That would be one as well. I would make it like easy on yourself, but don't make it look like you're being lazy about it in terms of sending follow-up. That's the thank you note piece that we want to make sure that we're including in your post-interview wrap-up. Again, making sure that you've set up a timeline, making sure we've restated that you're interested. If you also close them and you said to them, do you have any questions or concerns about me as a candidate for this position? And they said something. This is a great time in the thank you note to respond back, ideally to the hiring manager, right? We're not going to include this in a panel interview, more than likely, that other people may not have that concern. But typically that question is going to come along with you're sitting with your prospective boss, ideally, and sharing, are there any concerns you have about my candidacy for this role? Whatever they share that you already kind of dismissed or took care of in your conversation with them, we want to be able to come back to and say, I gave some more thought to your concerns about me as a candidate for this position. Definitely understand where you're coming from with your concerns, but I wanted to share some additional information that I should have shared while I was sitting with you, and I just thought about it after the fact. So excited about this role that I really wanted to give it as much thought as possible in terms of how the interview went. And then share something to make them more comfortable with you as a candidate about that specific thing. Okay. Certainly, if you need help with that, we can do like one-to-one coaching on it. But this is something that I want to make sure you're covering, because at times, if you're interviewing 10 to 15 people for one position or more, people may run together. And if there's a concern, they may just say, there's a concern with this person, and they forget that you talked to them about it at the end of the interview. So make sure that you're sealing that off completely with a thank you note. Okay, so thank you notes, pretty cut and dried. You can use email. You can use snail mail. Snail mail, it better be a really long process to make sure that's going to get there on time. I don't love snail mail unless it's something that is the final stage, and you know it is, and you're sure that that thank you note's going to get to them. Otherwise, definitely right through email. Please don't text them. Please don't send them through LinkedIn. Please don't send them through Facebook. Make sure that you're just emailing them, right? All kidding aside, Facebook, no. So the next phase of this is, how do you wrap up this process, right? And so this is the point in time where now you've spent considerable time working with this organization regarding an opportunity that you have a lot of interest in. You're passionate about it. You're excited about it. Interviewing is a lot like dating. And so you have invested quite a bit in this and hoping that it's going to work out. And all of a sudden, the other party says, this is not for me. This isn't going to work out. And that could also be you, by the way. So the question then is, like, how do you go forward? What's the follow-up look like from that perspective? And be as gracious as you can of a second place finisher. And you are, regardless of where you think you may be, always second place if you're not getting the job offer, because you have no idea how many other people are involved or how hard that decision was to come to decide who they're moving forward with. So the question is, how do you go forth with moving forward, separating, nicely, being very classy about it? Because I can tell you, until someone is in a seat in an organization, like started the job, sitting at their desk on the computer, they're not actually an employee. And a lot of things can happen from offer day to start day. So we don't want you to lose out on the possibility that you could still be hired. Also, this happens more frequently than you think. One position turns into two because they're so impressed with two people that they find a way to bring someone on board. Or they say, you're not the right fit for us in this group based on skills. However, we would love to share your information with others in the organization. I just recently had somebody in outplacement that this happened with, where they weren't hired for the first role and they were pretty deflated. And the hiring manager actually called them and said, would it be okay if I shared your information with others in the organization? I think you're a really great fit for the organization, not the ideal fit based on other candidates we had for this role. So you want to make sure, A, as you're wrapping up, they call you, Kevin, you're not the right person for this role. Absolutely thank them for their time. Ask if there's any feedback they can share with you so that you can be a better interview next time. Is there anything that they feel as though you could have done better at in the interview process? Whether it's a question you answered or experience maybe that you need to work on. You're just looking for feedback so you can be a better candidate. The next piece is it may not be the fastest process in the world for them to get back to you on what is the final outcome of the job. So follow up with them. A week is too long. 5 days is the maximum amount of time to wait before following up. And that's for interviewing, that's for reaching out, that's for connecting, all of it, right? So 5 days is definitely as far as I want you to go. Really like the 3 to 4 day range, you should be able to go back to them and say, hey, how are things going? Do you have any updates for me? I'm available whatever days, just to make it easy. Those are the types of things we're looking for. But the bottom line is make sure that as you're wrapping this component up, it's how did the interview go? Is there anything I should fix, I should work on, that you can help me with? Any feedback from any of the other folks who met me that you can share that would help me? Those are all things that are important. I would also then say something to the effect of, I really enjoyed meeting with the team. I enjoyed meeting with you. I appreciate your time. If there are future opportunities with the organization, I would love to be considered. And would it be okay if I see anything, I reach out to you to see if you can help me to meet some folks internally who would be responsible for future opportunities should that happen, right? You have every door open at that point. So you want to make sure you're doing that. And chances are they're not going to say no, mostly because telling the person they're not hired is the worst part of the hiring process in terms of the interview. So you tell the one person that they have the position. You tell the other person that they don't have the position. And that's the call that really is not fun, especially because not everybody can handle this in a professional and classy way. So they're not sure what they're going to get. And if you can put them at ease with you being a professional and understanding the situation that they're in and understanding that there's an opportunity probably longer term for you, that would be great. So could be additional opportunities that come up. Could be that the person doesn't work out and they don't actually start the position and they come to you for that role. There's no shame in that. Obviously, you were a very close second if you are hired after they made an offer to someone else that didn't work out. And third is, more often than not, even in the negotiation process, you can have things kind of come off the tracks, which is what many times that long pause that drives everybody crazy is about. So the final interview, things went really well, everybody's excited, and then you don't hear for at least a week, right? You're ghosted. You're not sure what's happening next. That's probably either a compensation negotiation happening internally in terms of what does the offer look like, or they're making an offer and not sure it's going to be accepted. And so they're not notifying anybody until they know what's happening. I realize that's not everybody's favorite feeling, but it's probably what's going on. Or there's multiple roles and there's budget changes. There could be, other dynamics there. But the first two are really the ones that we run into the most. So again, making sure we're professional, making sure that we are remaining with the impression we want to give at forefront and in talking to people, and then making sure that we have made it as easy as possible for them to reach out to us. The last piece of this is understanding that you have built a connection with someone. And many times it's interesting because we work really hard at finding this person who can hire us and finding the person who will be able to interview us and be able to connect us and all those good things. And then the interview happens and maybe we don't get the opportunity and we almost cut the cord completely and never talk to them again. And it's kind of bizarre because if you think about it, chances are if they interviewed you, they liked you. And if they interviewed you multiple times, they liked you quite a bit. And if they're interviewing you and they're in a capacity to hire someone for a position you're interested in, chances are really good they have peers who hire for the same role. So I would always follow up at the end of an interview that maybe you're not selected with, would it be okay if I stay in touch with you? If you haven't connected them on LinkedIn, then I would also say, would it be okay if I sent you a connection request on LinkedIn? You can probably do that much before this, but if you haven't, that's another nice thing to kind of work in there. So make sure that you're getting their sign off on staying in touch with them so that you can continue to network with them. And also, as you come across things that maybe they're connected to, reach out to them. Lastly, be a gracious finisher regardless of where you're finishing. So a couple things that can happen here. You may get through the interview process and you may realize this is not the right role for you, or you may realize that there's another role that's just a better fit. It's the exact same thing that happens on the hiring side, but we typically don't really know what to do with it when it happens on the interviewee side. So it is 100% okay to reach out to them and say, hey, I really enjoyed meeting with you, and I enjoyed the interview process and learning more about the organization. There's an opportunity that I am being considered for that I just feel as though is a much closer fit, and I feel like I'm much more excited about based on XYZ. And so I don't want to take up more of your time. I just wanted to let you know that so that they're not planning on having you as a candidate in a final slate and a discussion around who they're moving forward with when you're not in the picture at all. So if you're out of the picture, let them know that you're out. Don't drag it along to see what they end up with, just to see what they end up with. Okay? This is not like a emotional support job, right? We're not looking at these jobs as like, it's going to pick up my confidence if I get another offer when you have no interest in the offer. So that's another key piece of this whole operation, making sure that you're gracious about this. This is a snapshot of some of the things we coach on in the interview process. Certainly the follow-up and the thank you notes are important. The being a gracious second place finisher is really important. This is something that we do frequently in one-to-one coaching. Sometimes we do it as a group coaching, but if you've enjoyed this session and you've gotten something from it, or you know somebody who's maybe in the interview process that could use some additional help, please go ahead and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, share it with somebody that you know, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Stay in the loop at careeringwithcameron.com/talent connect, or check out our website, www.talent-connect.net.